Here we are at the beginning of James Joyce's Araby. I'm going to provide a screencast here. Please like this on YouTube and subscribe. So what I want to do here is, this is a very short story. It is the final one in the section of the story cycle on childhood. And as you know, it focuses on a child. It also has of the ones we've read, it's the only one that is a first-person narrator. It's narrated by the boy who is not named in the story. So I think in its form of narration, there's a little bit of immaturity in the boy's voice. Okay, so let's just look at this first opening. This opening paragraph, in a way, doesn't quite sound like the boy's voice. After this paragraph, though, it definitely is his voice. But here's the opening. North Richmond Street, being blind, was a quiet street except at the hour when the Christian Brothers School set the boys free. An uninhabited house of 2 stories stood at the blind end, detached from its neighbors in a square ground. The other houses of the street, conscious of decent lives within them, gazed at one another with brown, imperturbable faces. A couple things I want to highlight there. One is that the street is a dead-end street, but he uses the word blind here. Blind was used to describe those streets because you couldn't see past them because they ended with houses. So that's one thing there. It's also a quiet street, except at the time when the school set the boys free. So notice the boys are in a sense captive, and while they are captive, the street is quiet. But once they are set free, the street begins showing some life. Okay, and of course the vehicle or the institution that keeps the boys quiet is both an institution of the church and an institution of society, a religious school, okay, a Catholic school. All right. So I think also what's interesting here is the way in which the houses are described with very active verbs, right? One of them stood. It was detached from its neighbors. The other houses are conscious of decent lives within them, right? So the houses are sort of aware of what's happening inside of them. And they gaze. Notice, they stood and they gaze at one another with brown, imperturbable faces. So the houses have these faces, as you can imagine, houses with windows that can look like eyes, doors that can look like a nose or a mouth. Houses can kind of be drawn or made to look like faces, and that's certainly what's happening here. All right, so they're given a sort of identity. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead. Certainly, as you're reading this, pay attention to the way in which his feeling towards Mangan's sister are described. He's very attentive to the sensations, right? Especially visual sensations. He notices that her dress swung as she moved her body, and the soft rope of her hair tossed from side to side. He has his stalker moments, right, where he just lays on the floor watching her door. He makes sure that he can't be seen. The blind, again, we're seeing that word, was so he couldn't be seen. And he's looking for her. He's never spoken to her except for a few casual words, and yet her name was like a summons to all my foolish blood. It's really interesting to see the parallelism between this narrator's sort of sexual urges and Gabriel's at the end of the cycle in the dead. Okay? All right. So, I think one funny thing about this story is the way this boy sees himself as being on like a quest, right? Notice he says about all the noises on the street, these noises converged in a single sensation of life for me. I imagined that I bore my chalice safely through a throng of foes, right? So look, he's imagining himself almost like this knight who's carrying this thing to her, right? It's like his holy grail moment, okay? Um, then he has a moment where, my goodness, he talks to her, all right? Um, and he comes upon her. He says here, I didn't know if I would ever speak to her or not, or if I spoke to her, how I could tell her of my confused adoration. I think that's probably a fantastic phrase as an explanation of his feelings, just confused adoration. But my body was like a harp, and her words and gestures were like fingers running upon the wires. Oh, play him, girl. Play him like a harp, right? That's just what he's begging for. Um, I mean, in a harp, of course, the strings are strung so tight, any little movement on the strings um, will produce a sound. And, I mean, you know, very sexual, although, he's such a, naive kid here. He doesn't even really know what's so sexual about it, right? Okay, so, and now he gets a little bit close to her, right? All my senses seemed to desire to veil themselves, and feeling that I was about to slip from them, I pressed the palms of my hands together until they trembled, murmuring, oh love, many times, right? So look at this poor kid, right? He's just so overwhelmed by everything he's sensing, that he feels like he's going to slip from his consciousness and his senses, and he's just murmuring to himself, oh love, sweet boy. Okay, and she spoke to him. She addressed the first words to me. I was so confused that I didn't know what to answer. Right? He's not even fully present there. Poor kid. And she asked me if I was going to Araby, which is like basically a fair, a charity bazaar. And he says, I forget whether I answered yes or no. It would be a splendid bazaar. She would love to go. And he asks why she can't. This is one of the only things he remembers. And she says that she can't go because there was a retreat that week in her convent. Okay? Her brother, now just being in a convent, at this point, it just means a girls' school. It doesn't necessarily mean she's taken, vows or anything. But, girls would have gone to convent schools. And it might have been training to be a nun, but she's certainly well below the age of that. Okay, so notice now the light imagery that comes up here. The light from the lamp opposite our door caught the white curve of her neck, lit up her hair that rested there and falling, lit up the hand upon the railing. It fell over one side of her dress and caught the white border of a petticoat, just visible as she stood at ease. Okay, he is taking everything in visually here, right? It's all, what he's perceiving with his senses. And she says to him, "It's well for you," meaning if you can go, that's good. And he says, "If I go, I will bring you something." Oh my goodness! Now he's got a mission, and look at him now. What innumerable follies laid waste my waking and sleeping thoughts after that evening. I wished to annihilate the tedious intervening days. I chafed against the work of school. At night in my bedroom and by day in the classroom, her image came between me and the page I strove to read. The syllables of the word Araby were called to me through the silence in which my soul luxuriated and cast an Eastern enchantment over me. So he told a girl that he's going to get something for him at a bazaar, and now he just cannot deal with waiting until he can go and have something to give her, right? What would that give him? Gives him a reason for being, but it also gives him another reason to talk to her, Okay, and all right. So now he's got this. So now he's got this purpose to his life. Okay, his thoughts are wandering. He has no patience. Um, Life now stands between him and his desire. Everything seems like child's play, ugly, monotonous child's play. Of course, an irony here is that what he's engaged in is, of course, child's play. Okay, I'm going to pause there, and we'll close out with the next screen cap.